Now, the first thing I want us to do this morning is to go over the exercises. Let's take out your exercise number 2, and let's go over that. Look at it very carefully. Exercise number 2 has to do with the vowels in the alphabet. The first question was, which vowels are known as full letter vowels? Jeff, give me one. Okay, the tsere yod. Okay, always give the vowel first and the vowel letter second. Okay, tsere yod is one. All right, Jan, can you give me a second?
Hey.
Okay, what vowel goes with the hey? You almost had it right there. Comets. Comets hey. Okay, comets hey is the full letter vowel there. All right, Kyle, give me a third.
The wow.
Okay, which wow?
The
Give the vowel with it.
Holem.
Okay, holem.
Holem.
Holem wow. Holem wow. All right. And Kempis, can you give us a fourth one? We have 2 left.
Hirek Yod.
Okay, Hirek Yod. And the last one, Scott Jackson. Shurek. Shurek, okay? So remember, we have 2 wows, 2 yods, and 1 hey. The hey goes with the comet's hey. The 2 yods are tsere yod and hirek yod. And the 2 wows are holem wow, the dot over the top, and the shurik with the dot in the middle. Okay, those are the 5 full letter vowels. Now, we have 4 of them listed here in B. Circle the item in each group which does not belong and explain why in number 1. Kenny, which one did you circle and why?
I circled the far right.
Okay, the far right one, the tsere.
Said didn't have no vowel. All the other ones were full letter vowels.
Okay, it was not a full letter vowel. It did not have a consonant with it. Did not have a consonant with it, okay? Did anyone mark anything differently? Okay, let's go to number 2. Number 2, Gus, which one did you circle?
The tsere it's a long vowel, and all the other ones are short vowels.
Okay, good. The tsere is a long vowel. The segol, the kibbutz, and the patak are short vowels. Did anyone circle anything different with a different reason? Okay, Scott?
I put patak because all the rest use dots and it was a dash.
All right, that's a legitimate reason. That shows the power of observation. All right, so that you see the distinction, and it's patak. Okay, patak. Got to remember the a because that's the sound it makes. All right. The third one, as we look at it here, George, which one did you circle?
Hirek.
Okay, and why?
Same reason as the first. There's no consonant in the formation.
All right. Anyone have anything different? Okay, Jeff?
Short vowel?
Pardon?
It's the only short vowel?
Okay, it's the only short vowel. You can give as a reason, or you can give that it's the only vowel without a full, is not a full letter vowel, only vowel without a consonant. 3 different ways you could have stated that. All right. And Dennis, how about number 4?
The Hirek, the only short vowel.
Okay, the hirik, the second one there from the left, is the only short vowel. The holem is long, the tsere yod is long, and the shurik is long. Anyone have anything else? What do you have there, Scott Basolo?
I had the holem marked because the vowel marker is above the consonant.
Okay, all right. The holem would be the only one above. Okay? Any other? Okay, someone by the same reasoning could have circled the shurik to say the only one that's marked internally rather than below or above. Okay, let's read together. I'll tell you what, on the first line, I'll read and you repeat. And then after that, we'll see how you can do on your own. Okay, so the first line on number 1, C1, D, Ga, Mi, Be, Da, Ke, Pu, Ko, Ra, Wa, Zu, Te, You. Okay, now you try to read in about the same cadence the second line. Chi, Okay, just one change there, and that is the fifth one from the right. The pay with a holum should be fo. Fo. Notice there's no doggish in it. So it's not the hard sound. So it's fo. Okay, repeat after me. Chi, lo, na, te, fo, si, sa, ri, va, ke, tu, go, da. All right, and then let's go the first line of the short vowels. Repeat after me. Pe, ha, bi, di, tu, se, pa, te, ki, su, wa, za, te, sa, ka. All right, now try on your own the second line. Go ahead and start. You're slowing down there a little bit. Okay, repeat after me. La, ni, mu, du, ta, ra, ve, ge, ha, et, we, et, hu, ni. All right, now notice I had some that were like I and some like E, and that's because the words are pronounced that way. You'll have some that will be one way and some another way. And you just have to keep that in mind on the hirik. Sometimes it's an E sound, sometimes it's an I sound. And as we go through, sometimes it will defy expectation. It's one of those things you just have to remember to learn. It's like in English, where you have O-U-G-H. Sometimes it's uff, as in rough. Sometimes it's oo, as in through, you see. Sometimes it's ow, as in bow. So whatever you're doing, you have to realize that there are some things, some spellings, some vowels that will have different pronunciations because it's a different word. And we ask why? Well, about all we can say is just because it's that way. Why do we choose to pronounce through instead of pronouncing it thruff? Who knows? Why not roo for rough? Okay. Number 3. Let's go down and then go through these. This is mixing long and short. Repeat after me. Me, va, de, ke, pe, ko, ra, we, zu, tu, ga, te, de, bo, she. Okay, now try the second line on your own. Go. Yay, you finished the line. All right. Let's go through that again because there's some here that we have to watch out for. The fourth from the in, the cheth, pathak, yod. The pathak plus yod is I. So that is chai. All right? You say the same thing if you say lachayim. Okay? Lachayim means to life. And it's the plural form. So chai is life. Some of you may have even seen a little pin in those two Hebrew letters that people wear just to say life. And then you're supposed to ask them, well, what's that say? And they tell you it's life. Then they ask you about, do you have eternal life? All those type things. It's used as a witnessing device, and also used to talk about the matter of abortion as well, being pro-life. So need to recognize that word and pronounce it correctly. Okay, chai is life. All right, so let's go across there and repeat after me. Sa, si, tu, ge, ri, to, you, pi, ve, gi, chai, ne, tu, ye. All right, now the number 4 are words of one syllable. All of these are words. For example, dor means generation. Taf means infant. Av means father. Okay, don't listen to the Greek next door. All right. Mol means to circumcise. Pur means to light. Chol means a wound. Gan is garden, like the Garden of Eden. And you just go on across there. We have all kinds of words. These are all Hebrew words. Some of them are somewhat rare. Some of them occur quite regularly. Some of them you will learn, and some of them you already have learned, and some of those you will learn by the time you finish the first semester. So let's start at the first and read them. Dor, taf, av, mol, pur, chol, gan, chish, pim, nade. Second line, yesh, aid, im, sus, gil, tov, kol, or, shear, roots. What does roots sound like to you? Okay, you think of roots of a tree, but what if I say roots? What do you think? You wouldn't think of running? Run means to run, roots. So if a Hebrew is yelling at you and he's saying, roots, don't grow roots, fly, okay? Start running. All right, let's go to the number 5, words with 2 syllables. As we look at them, these are also words that you've already seen a few of, and you'll see more of as we go along. Remember, the accent is on the last syllable unless otherwise indicated, okay? Davar, diber, kotel, shemesh, sefer, boker, erev, na'ar, akal, shomer, kisei, Baruch. Do you recognize that word? Baruch Adonai means what? Praised be the Lord. It's the idea, it's really blessed, Baruch. If you're blessed, you're Baruch. Okay, the next one, Chalutz. Wered. Zera. Beni. All right, the last line, Kara. Wihi. Eitzer. And that should probably be a little bit smoother on the Zion, Ezer, but in modern Hebrew I often hear it pronounced more like it was like a tzadi instead of a Zion. And so you just kind of have to go with that one, and perhaps that's a remnant from ancient Hebrew, the way they pronounce it too. So you'll hear it Ezer, you'll hear it Eitzer. Don't make it Eitzer. Don't make it real hard. It's kind of a softened TS when you hear it. Eitzer or Ezer. All right? Yicher. Baal. Baal is actually what we pronounce as Baal in our English pronunciation of the title of the Canaanite deity. In modern Hebrew, it's Baal. And in the classical Hebrew, it's Baal. Okay, the next one is Yayin. Yayin is the word for wine. Eli. Evan. Amer. What's Amer mean? He said. All right. Exercise 3. Pull out that exercise. It's the one that is due today. workbook exercise number 3, and let's go over it and turn it in, and then I'll talk to you more about the things that are here. Which letters are the true gutturals? The true gutturals. Alphabetical order, right to left. All right, James Lee.
Olive, K, A, and I.
Olive and what?
K. A,
Okay, hey,
A, then K,
right?
and I.
Okay, good. I couldn't quite hear what your second letter was, and I was afraid it was bait. So I wanted to hear it again. All right, Aleph, Hey, Cheth, and Ayin. That's in order, right to left, the true gutturals. Which letter sometimes behaves as a guttural? All right, John Melkon? Resh. Okay, Resh. And what are the 3 characteristics governing the gutturals, John Strickland?
First, they refuse doubling. Second, they prefer an A-class vowel. And third, they prefer a compound shua.
Compound schwa. All right. They reject doubling. They prefer A-class vowels. That means around them and under them especially. And then also they prefer compound schwa, like the hatef vowels. Hatef patak, hatef segol, hatef comments. Chad?
Oh, I was just going to ask, I don't really know what a compound schwa is.
Okay, compound schwa is what we went over in class on the half vowels, or the half vowels that have 2 parts, make them compound. They have the schwa plus pathic. They have schwa plus comments, schwa plus segol. Okay? So if you just remembered the rules from that, plus those rules are there in that chapter, in the lesson. And we'll be going over that also today again. Yes, John?
That means, does that mean they prefer to have that underneath them?
That's right. Correct. They prefer it underneath. Like you had on the word Adonai today in your vocabulary. It had a hatef pathak under it. It's an aleph. It's a guttural. It does not want to take a simple schwa, the 2 dots alone. It prefers to have the compound schwa. Compound made up of at least 2 parts. Okay? All right? Identify the strong gutturals. Which of the gutturals are strong? Franz?
The hey and the hey.
Okay, the hey and the cheth are the strong ones. The weak ones, Greg?
Olive,
Aleph and I. All right? Which letters of the Hebrew alphabet sometimes lose their consonantal character and become silent? Write them in alphabetical order from right to left. Roger?
Aleph, Hey, Vav, Yod.
Okay, Aleph, Hey, Wow, and Yod. Aleph, Hey, Wow, and Yod. All can become silent. Now, if you added ayin in there somewhere, that's fine. Just make certain it's in the right order. It should be the last one listed. I'd be interested in seeing which one you left out, but there are only 4 blanks, so you had a choice. Which letters are labials? Scott Jackson.
Beth, Mame, and Pay.
Good, you even put them in the right order as well. Beth, Mame, and Pay. Why are they called labials, Mike?
They're formed essentially with the lips.
All right, they're formed with the lips, pronounced with the lips. Identify the 2 different kinds of dogish, Jeff.
You're weak. I think it's lene. You're strong, forte.
Okay, and you can use one or either one of those titles. If you say strong dogish and weak dogish, if you say doubling dogish and hardening dogish, if you use lene or forte, all of those are correct, just as long as you have the 2 different ones. Lene and weak and hardening are the same. Lene, weak, and hardening are exactly the same, just 3 names for the same thing. And doubling and strong and forte are names, 3 names for the same dogish. All right? Kelly, F. Which letters take the weak dogish? Alphabetical order.
The Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Kaf, Pei, and T.
Tau.
Ta.
Tau.
Tau.
Okay, good. The Bagad Kafath letters. How does the weak dogish affect the pronunciation of these letters? Eric? It hardens the pronunciation. When is the weak dogish omitted from one of these letters, from the Bagad Kafath letters? Jeremy, Maine?
If it does not begin a syllable, or if it is directly preceded by a vowel.
Okay, those are the 2 points right there. If it does not begin a syllable, it doesn't take that hardening dogish. If it's preceded by a vowel, it does not take the hardening dogish. There are some exceptions, and we'll talk about them during the lesson time. H, what letters accept the strong dogish? Scott Basolo?
All the letters except the gutturals and resh.
Okay, all except the gutturals and resh. And what effect does the strong dogish have on these letters, James Wood?
It doubles the letter.
It doubles those letters. And why is the strong dogish most commonly employed, George?
It's a compensation for a letter that has dropped off or elided.
Okay,
And the second one is characteristic of certain intensive verb forms.
correct. It is characteristic of certain verb forms, generally called intensive verb forms. Okay, those are the 2 reasons why the strong dogish is most commonly employed. All right? Describe the functions of the raphe. Tom?
Smoother pronunciation?
Smoother pronunciation in what type of situation?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Kempis, what kind of situation does it provide smoother pronunciation?
Well, there's a vowel before.
No, we're not looking for that specifically there. Let's see. Scott Jackson, do you have the answer to that? No. Okay, good. Jeff?
When you would normally have a doubling.
When you would normally have the doubling dogish, but if the doubling dogish is difficult to pronounce or creates certain difficulties for pronunciation, then it is omitted from the letter and the raphe is put above it so that you have a signal that the schwa underneath is still to be vocal instead of silent. We'll talk more about that. It's one of those exceptions that has exceptions. All right, Tom?
Is that one of the corrections in the book where it doesn't have it in the example? I remember, or maybe I'm just not seeing it, on 6A, 1B,
And which example are you looking at?
where it says sometimes, in such cases, a short horizontal line is placed above the letter, but I don't see a short horizontal line above the letter in the example. Page
Okay, it's
32.
in mine. If it's not in yours, that's a surprise to me of why that, I don't know why that would be. I'll have to look at that and see.
Page 32, 6A.
Down lower, it's in the second word that has it in it.
Yeah, but not in the one where it says, in such cases, a short horizontal line.
Well, that's just
That's
the,
the name of the horizontal line.
Raphe itself.
Yeah, no, but, okay, but I don't see.
Okay, now, on raphe, you have the name. There's no raphe on
Oh, I'm
raphe.
sorry, it's just saying the name.
It's just saying the name.
Okay.
It's just the name. Okay? All right? And raphe means soft. So that's just the name for it. All right? There are only 2 examples given, and they're toward the bottom of the page. For example, the verb bikashu frequently occurs without the strong dagesh, and it goes on in the 3rd line to show it with it. That's the only place you'll see the raphe accent, or should see it, in the discussion of it here. That should be the only place where you see it, in that 3rd line. Okay? Yes?
Is the doubling dogish, does it look like when you have 2 letters that are repeated and they both have a dogish in it? Is that-
No. It's doubling dogish is in one letter, and you know by seeing that you are to double it in pronunciation. It's not written, it's pronounced. It's not written double, it's pronounced double. Okay? And the dogish is your clue that it's to be pronounced double. All right? Circle the letter that does not belong in each group and explain why. Under K, number 1. How about this one, Jan? Which one did you circle?
Circle P,
And why?
it's not a guttural as others.
Okay, good. It's not a guttural as others. And number 2, David Lee?
Kate? It's
Not a silent letter?
Okay, it's not a silent letter, not a silent letter. The he, the middle one. Okay, number 3, Jeff.
Day, the others are labials.
Okay, Daleth.
Dalit.
All right.
Space that out there.
Okay, Daleth is not a labial. Okay, number 4, Scott Basolo. Oh, excuse me, one question, Chad.
I had a different answer on that one. I circled the main because it's not a begag fat letter, so I can't take
Okay,
it.
that's legitimate too. That's legitimate too. All right. Scott Basolo, number 4.
I had olive because it's not a strong guttural.
All right. Okay. And number 5, Greg.
Rish,
And why?
because it's not technically a guttural.
Okay, it's not always a guttural. Okay, it's not technically guttural, it's not always a guttural, or if you put it's sometimes a guttural. All right, number 6, Jeremiah.
The olive because it's always silent.
Okay, Aleph is always silent. The other 3 can also be silent, but Aleph is always silent. You could have also said that Hey, Wow, and Yod are vowel letters and Aleph isn't. Okay? So there are a number of different reasons on each of these. I'll look at them carefully when I grade them. Number 7, Kyle.
Lamed is not a Dagesh letter.
Okay, it's not a Bagad Kafaf letter.
Oh.
All right? Lamed is not a Bagad Kafaf letter. And then number 8, Kelly.
Number 8, I did the hey, and it's the only labial.
Okay, it's the only labial. Okay? So there's a number of different reasons you could have those. And I'm looking on the reverse of your page to see if you've completed 7A on page 33 of the textbook, and also the exercise in 8A. And then let's look at these translations of these Hebrew verbs here. All right, let's begin at the upper right. The word tov means what, Mike?
Good, well.
Good, good, good or well. Good or well. There's a lot of other meanings too. It can mean beautiful. All right? So when you talk to your wife and you tell her she's beautiful, don't, though, tell her that she's tov, because that's the masculine form. All right? You have to say tovah. All right? Everyone repeat that. Tovah. All right? So when you see your wife tonight and you think she looks beautiful, you just say tovah. All right? Beautiful. All right? Yada. Roger. It's that second one there at the top. He knew. He knew. Okay? He knew. Or if you have know there, K-N-O-W, it's he knew. All right? Bayith, the last one there. Oh, Scott, you have a question?
Which one was it? We're going down or across?
No, we're
Oh, I'm
starting at the
sorry.
upper right and
I'm
going
sorry. I
left.
gotcha.
Okay? Start at the upper right-hand corner and go left across the row. Okay, so Tov was first, is good or well. Yada, he knew. Bayit, George.
House.
House. All right, now the second row, starting at the right. John Melcon, Yad.
Hand or power?
Hand or power, correct, hand or power. Gadol, Eric.
Great or big.
Great or big. All right. And Bain without a yod between the 2 letters, Jeff?
Son or grandson.
Son or grandson. And then the third line, starting at the right, Yom, Kempis?
Day.
Day. Okay, the middle, Chai, Greg?
Life, living, alive.
Okay, life, living or alive. And Goy, Gus?
Nation?
Nation. Anyone have anything else there? Okay, nation. Okay, Lakach. Lakach. Scott Basolo.
He took.
He took. It can also mean he received. He took or he received. The middle one, Har. Har. Scott Jackson.
Mountain.
Mountain. It can also be hill. Hill or mountain. Davar. John Strickland.
Word, matter, thing.
Okay, word, matter, or thing. Okay, now let's pronounce these. Starting at the upper right, I'll pronounce, you repeat after me. Tov.
Tov.
Yada.
Yada.
Bayit.
Bayit.
Yad.
Yad.
Gadol.
Gadol.
Bain.
Bain.
Yom.
Yom.
Chai.
Chai.
Goy.
Goy.
Lakach.
Lakach.
Her.
Her.
Davar.
Davar.
All right, now you're beginning to catch some of the ways of pronouncing these words and pronouncing the vowels and the letters. They're beginning to start to gel, and some of them are becoming almost like second nature. And there's some of them that you look at and you say, I haven't quite got it yet. That's normal at this stage, but you keep working at it. I want you to get to where when I call on you, you can immediately pronounce what you see in front of you. Okay? Without hesitation. Because you're beginning to learn the letters and the vowels and what their sounds are. I want you to turn to the end of chapter 3 in your textbook, and I want us to go through all of the words that are in the vocabulary. Some of them we just went over that were involved in your worksheet, but I want us to go over all of these so that you're prepared for your vocabulary quiz 1 week from today, which is over this vocabulary and this vocabulary alone, okay? Chapter 3 vocabulary alone for next Tuesday. All right? Repeat after me. I'm starting at the upper right-hand corner on your page there at the end of chapter 3, and I'll be reading right to left across the top and then going down the second line and read across there. Tov, Yada, Bayit, Yad, Yalad, Bain, Yom, Yatsah, Bat, Yashav, Gadal, Gadol, Lakach, Derek, Goy, Mut, Har, Davar, Mawet, Chai, Yatav. Let me give a brief word of explanation on these. Tov, good or well, that's an adjective. Like we say Boker Tov, good morning. Yada, a verb meaning he knew. It could also be translated in various ways, like he was acquainted, he realized. It's also used metaphorically of a man having sexual relationships with a woman. Adam knew his wife Eve, so it's used metaphorically that way. Bayit is the word house, but over 77% of the time you'll see it as Beit, like Beit Dagon, the house of Dagon, or Beit Lechem, the house of bread, Bethlehem. It normally occurs in a very different form than Bayit. Bayit is the absolute form of the noun, where Beit literally means house of. House of. Scott?
Do we see a form change then?
You'll see a form change, yes. Mm-hmm. Right. If it's pronounced differently, there's been a change. Okay? And we'll talk about that when we get to the nouns. Okay, Yad means hand or power, and it has to do, the Yad can refer to the hand alone, but the Yad includes everything all the way down to at least the elbow. At least the elbow. This is all Yad. All right? There's a different word for just the palm. There's a different word for the entire arm. So Yad is often just the hand that grasps, but it also includes the wrist, and then it can also include all the way to the elbow, is Yad. Yalad, he bore, he brought forth. The idea is here to cause conception, or to give birth to. If a man is the subject of the verb, he's causing the conception. He's not conceiving. All right? To sire, S-I-R-E, is another way to translate it. And when it's a woman as a subject, she bears the child, she brings forth the child. All right? Bain, translated son or grandson. There is no special word for grandson. And so you have to use Bain for that as well. And that includes great-grandsons and great-great-grandsons. It doesn't matter what the relationship is. Yom is day. And Yatsah, he went out, he departed. It's the idea of being in somewhere and leaving. Yatsah, to go out. Bat is the word for daughter. daughter. Bain is son, Bat is daughter. Bathsheba, a daughter of Sheba. Okay? Yashav, he sat, he dwelt, he stayed. All depends on context. On the vocabulary quiz, you'll be asked again to give me just one of those. Don't give me a variety. The reason I do that, I don't want to have to make a choice if you have one that's totally wrong and one that's right. Which one did you intend? Which one did you write first? All those things, no. You just give me one, and it better be right. All right? So Yashav, he sat, he dwelt, he stayed. Gadal, he was great, he was big. There's all kinds of meanings here for Gadol also, because Gadol can refer not to just big in size, but can refer to one who's senior in age. My big brother. Just we do the same thing in English. My big brother. He might be shorter than I am, you see, but he's older, so I call him my big brother. All right, Gadal, and I don't have one. Mine's just a little brother, and he is littler too. Okay, Gadol is great or big. This is the adjective. Gadal is the verb. Gadol is the adjective. Lakach, he took or he received. Derek, way or path. It's a noun. Goy, you've heard people call you goy or say you're just a goy. It means a Gentile. The goyim are the Gentiles. It means the non-Jewish nations. However, Israel is also called a goy in certain contexts, where it just means a generic nation. But normally, goyim refers to the Gentile nations, those outside of Israel. And as individuals, we are then goy. And that's, by the way, where we get the English word guy from, G-U-Y, comes from goy. Probably originated in New York. And then you have mut. Mut means to die. Notice it is not he died. It's to die. That's because we have these middle vowels like that in a verb. They are infinitives. And so we change the translation and say to die instead of he died. He died is actually a different form. He died is in parenthesis just to tell you what the form is when you have the normal form of the verb. Okay? So don't memorize the parenthesis. The parenthesis is not what I want on the quiz. Okay? And then Har is mountain. Har Megiddo, the Mount of Megiddo. We say Armageddon. We leave the hay off. And then we have Davar, word, matter, or thing. Has a wide range of meanings. Mawet is the noun derived from the verb mut. And so it's the noun death. Chai is life or living or alive. Yatav is the verb form of tov, which was the adjective that we began with. Yatav means he was good or he was well. Okay, the first thing we want to do is go back and review again these special letters that we had talked about, mentioned it several times. As I told you, I like to mention them early. I like to mention them often. I like to mention them before you read about them. I like to mention them when you read about them. I like to mention them after you read about them. There are a number of issues like this that it pays well to have some knowledge and familiarity before you even read about them so you can understand what's going on. We've talked about these 5 letters several times now. They're very, very important. I can't stress this enough. If I were to put onto one side of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper the things that are most significant and most important to remember in order to rightly understand biblical Hebrew, this is one of those factors that would be on there right after the alphabet. It's very important. I would put it before a large amount of vocabulary because vocabulary gives you the ability to understand what the words mean, but it doesn't give you the ability to understand why words change the way they change. To understand why words change, you have to understand these letters, these gutturals, and why words look different, and why when you start attaching a definite article on them, or you start attaching something else on them, why things happen to them. This is what you've got to remember. So I can't stress this enough. These 5 are very, very important. If you don't understand the gutturals and you can't identify them and you can't identify the rules, you're going to struggle through the rest of Hebrew, all the way through until you finish and have had all you can take of it. Because these rules, these three rules, are very important for understanding how the language works. It's kind of like trying to explain to someone why we have contractions in English and what the contractions mean, how we go from do not to don't. You see? When we go from is not to isn't, you have to understand what's happening. And you have to understand what it's representing and why that change takes place. And you have to look at other factors in other areas of our language as well to try to understand what's going on. And the gutturals are very significant for that in Hebrew. So this is why I've repeated it so often, why we'll go over it and you'll hear it many more times. We're not through hearing about it. They refuse doubling, they prefer A-class vowels, and they prefer compound schwa. So those are the things we need to really remember. Now there's one more thing that I want to bring out that we have not talked about. And we'll come back to this again and again as well. And that is what is called the patak furtive. It's called furtive because it just kind of sneaks in, I guess. But the patak furtive comes under the final gutturals. Remember, you have to understand what the gutturals are. The gutturals are aleph, he, cheth, ayin, and sometimes resh. Now, when a guttural is final, it's the last letter in a word, then the pathak under it is what we call a pathak furtive. For example, in the word for spirit, also could be translated wind, ruach. Notice something that happens here. We've been pronouncing consonants and the vowel always following the consonant. As in the shurik here after the resh, ru. We don't say ur, it's ru. And so the next letter, though, we're not saying rucha. We're not saying rucha. We learned chai with a pathic under the cheth is chai. The vowel is pronounced after it. But when it's the last letter in a word, and that letter is a guttural, and the pathic is under it, it's pronounced before the consonant. So this is ruach. Now notice I said ruach with an accent on the ru. The ach is tacked on, but there's no accent mark given for us above the ru. That's because it's understood that the pathak furtive behaves as a half vowel. It behaves as a half vowel. That means it cannot form a syllable by itself and it cannot be accented. It cannot form a syllable by itself and it cannot be accented. So this is ruach, means spirit or wind. Let's pronounce it together. Ruach. Again, ruach. And then we have shemoah. Shemoah is a verb form. The schwa at the beginning is vocal because it starts the word. We have the holum above the meme, and we have a patak under the final letter of the word, and that letter is a guttural. It's a guttural. Therefore, it's a patak furtive. That means, since the schwa cannot form a syllable, and the patak furtive cannot form a syllable, this also is a one-syllable word. That sounds very strange to us in English, because we look at that and say there was three sounds, sh, mo, ah, and we would say there are three syllables in English, but not in Hebrew. It's treated as one syllable, and that's important to remember. The syllables are divided by Hebrew rules, not by English rules. Okay? Half vowels cannot form independent syllables. And patak furtive is considered a half vowel. Therefore, it cannot form a syllable. The last one is gavoah. Gavoah. How many syllables do we have in gavoah? Two. We have two regular vowels, the holum and the comments. So there's only two syllables. Now we have one other thing occurring here. What do you see that you've not seen anywhere before? Looks like a doggish where? In the final hay. When a doggish occurs in the final hay, it is not a doggish. It is called a mappiq. Mappiq. M-A-P-P-I-Q. Mappiq. M-A-P-P-I-Q. The mappiq hardens the hay to where it almost becomes like a chayth on the end. Gavoach. You have to have a little bit of guttural breath there at the end. Okay? That's not a doubling doggish, because remember, gutturals cannot be doubled, with the exception of resh, which sometimes can, because resh is just sometimes a guttural. Okay, John?
It's not a doggish, but does it do the same thing as a doggish because it hardens?
In essence, yes. But it's not a true hardening, because how can you harden a hay sound? It makes it guttural, is what it does. That's why it's called mappiq. It's different. Okay? Scott?
Could you pronounce all three again?
Okay, all three again. Ruach. Everyone?
Ruach.
Shemoach.
Shemoach.
Gavoach.
Gavoach.
Okay, got it? All right, Scott?
The final ayin in the second word, it's silent.
It's silent in this case, yes.
Are there any rules to know when the ayin's silent?
No. There are no rules available. Sorry. Okay? Sometimes we wish they were, but the masteries did not supply any rules, probably because they couldn't develop any rules that would be consistent. It just boiled down to having to know a word. Like, how do you have a rule about how you pronounce O-U-G-H in English? Are there any rules for that? No, there are none. You can try to develop them, but you fall short. You just have to know the word. And that's the same here. Okay? All right? Let's go from there then to talk about something else. Let's talk more about the doggish. I've called it the piercer because doggish comes from a verb, dagash, that means to pierce. Like to pierce something with an arrow, to pierce something with a dagger or with a spear. And it puts a hole, it has a dot in the bosom of the letter, is the doggish. Like you have it here in the taith. You see the doggish in one form of the taith, you don't see the doggish in the other. So the doggish is the piercer. This is explained to you in your textbook on page 31, where you're told there that dagash means to pierce, right at the top of the page under 5a. And what I want to do is just go through some of these things we're talking about on page 31 and following in your textbook. First of all, the dagesh lene, also known as the weak dagesh, also known as the hardening dagesh. It occurs primarily in Bagad Kafath letters. Primarily, actually, only in Bagad Kafath letters. So if you know these 6 letters, you know where the dagesh lene occurs. Remember that the dagesh looking point in the bosom of a final hay is not a dagesh. It is a mappiq. So these are the 6 that have the dagesh lene. The weak dagesh, the one that makes the hard sound. That's why it's also known as the hardening dagesh. It is used when the letter begins a syllable and does not follow a vowel. So if we look at the first 2 words of the Hebrew Bible, Bereshit bara, in the beginning, created. He created. And after that, you have the 3rd word is Elohim, God. Bereshit. How many Bagad Kafath letters do you see in these 2 words?
4.
One person says 4 Bagad Kafath letters. How many of you agree? All right. Who has a better number? Someone says 3. How many of you agree with that? Oh, you're slow to raise your hands with that. There are 3. There are 3. The Beith at the beginning of Bereshit, the Tau at the end of Bereshit, and the Beith at the beginning of Bara. There are only 3 Bagad Kafath letters. Bagad Kafath, Beith, Gimel, Daleth, Kaf, Pei, Tau. So there are only three here. Now notice the three. The first one in Bereshit has the dogish in it. Why does it have the dogish in it? That's what it does. Why is it there? It is beginning a syllable. And it is not following a vowel because it's the very first word in the Hebrew Bible. So there's nothing, it doesn't follow anything. So it has then a dogish in it to harden it. All right? What's the second Begad Kafaf letter? The Tau. Does it have a dogish in it? Why? Okay, it follows a vowel, and it ends a syllable rather than beginning a syllable. Therefore, it doesn't have the dogish in it. All right? What's the third letter that's a Begad Kafaf? The Beith in Bara. Why does it have a dogish in it? It begins a syllable, begins a new word, in fact. And is it preceded by a vowel? No, the Tau before it doesn't have a vowel under it. Okay, so this tells us why then these have the dogish in them and why they don't. John, and then we'll come back to Eric.
So the rule of following the vowel even applies if it's in a word and a separate
Correct.
word because of how it's pronounced?
Absolutely. Yes, it goes across words. It's not just within words. It goes across words. Yes.
Same question. Yeah, the proximity of the vowel, when you say it's when it's immediately preceded by a vowel, so that
It can be in the preceding word. Okay? Like bara, if this was berashi, hirik yod, and no tau on the end, then bara would have to be vara. Vara. It'd have to be without the dogish because it would be beginning after a vowel. All right? Okay? Let's look at the exceptions to it now that we've mentioned that much. Jeff.
It'd still be the same word, even though you pronounce it.
It still mean the same.
Just pronounce it.
Yes, it'd just be pronounced differently. Okay? All right? The apparent exceptions. Yes, James.
If there's the end of a sentence and then it starts, do you still look back to see if there's a vowel?
No, we're going to talk about that. The question James has a very good one. If it's the end of a verse or sentence, or actually if it's the beginning of a verse, do you look back to the end of the preceding verse? Is what he's intending there. No, you do not. You don't go across the major accents, and that's what supplies one of the apparent exceptions. The apparent exceptions are in this one. How many Begad Kafaf letters do you see in these two words? How many agree? I want to see hands. Oh, you should all have your hands up. There are only three, all right? There's a tau. There's a tau in the first word. There's a tau and a kaf in the second word. That's three Begad Kafaf letters, all right? So why do we not have a dogish in the tau that's in the first word there, in kin ati? Why don't we have a dogish in it? It begins a syllable, doesn't it? There's a vowel before it. The preceding syllable ends in a vowel. The preceding syllable ends in a vowel. Therefore, you do not put the dogish in the tau. Now, let's go to the second word. Why is there a dogish in the tau here if the preceding word ends in a vowel? It's because of the accent, the two dots over the top of the preceding syllable. That those two dots are a major accent, a major disjunctive accent, and whenever you have a major disjunctive accent, then that's as though you started a new verse as far as the Begad Kafaf letters are concerned. So the dogish is in the tau ante akel, even though it follows a vowel, because that vowel is in a syllable that has a major accent on it. All right? And it's a disjunctive accent. We'll talk about accents here in the near future. But major accent says that's emphasized, and then there's a break in the thought, and there's a break in pronunciation, and it's as though you start over again with the next word. Therefore, this is like Bereshit. Bereshit begins the whole Hebrew Bible. Te akel begins the next portion of this verse. Okay? Begins the next logical portion of the verse. because the accents divide by logical portions, we're going to find out. Now, why doesn't the kaf have a doggish in it in te akel? It's following a syllable that ends in a vowel. It follows a syllable that ends in a vowel. Ah ends in a vowel. Doesn't have a consonant closing it. So the kaf does not have a doggish. All right? Another apparent exception. Here we have a word. Notice there's no major accent on key, but we have a doggish in the bait. That's because the bait here is a preposition, meaning in. Literally, this ki ba'esh means because in fire, or because with fire. The bait is a preposition. And the way that the Masoretes chose to signal that this is a preposition and not part of a noun that would be pronounced ba'esh is to keep the doggish in it even when it follows a syllable that ends in a vowel. So a bait preposition, and it also happens with the kaf. Bait and kaf prepositions, which are single letter prepositions attached to the beginnings of words. We'll get to those in a few more chapters. They are exceptions to the rule. And it's to help us to identify so that we can see what they are. Then another exception when we have Yavo'u B'nai Ha-Elohim. How many Begad Kafath letters do you see in these three words? How many Begad Kafath letters? Kempis says 2. How many agree? Only John? Dennis? It's correct, men. There are only 2 Begad Kafath letters. Ba, how many base? 2. Gimels, how many gimels? 0. Dalas, how many dalas? 0. How many kafs? 0. How many paiths? 0. How many taus? 0. 2 baiths are all we have. The first baith does not have a doggish. Why? It follows a syllable that ends in a vowel. Ya ends in a vowel. Doesn't close with a consonant. So the baith does not take a doggish. But notice the second word. The baith has a doggish in it. And it's not because it's a preposition. And it's not because you have a major accent on the preceding word. Why? All it is for here is to avoid having too many aspirated consonants too close together. Yavo'u v'nei. That's too many V sounds for Hebrew, for the Hebrew mind. In other words, it becomes a matter of preference, sound preference in the language. That's all it is. So you have to watch for that as well. And how do you get that? Well, that's partly feel for the language. And the technical name for this rule is euphony. It's what sounds good. Euphony says that it has good sound. Good sound. It sounds good. It's euphonious. To them, that sounds good not to have those 2 V sounds in a row. Not to say Yavo'u v'nei Elohim. All right? Sometimes people use the rule of euphony in such a way that I pronounce it this way. All right? And that's because there are many, many times in some of the grammars where you'll read rules where people will say it's for euphony. And half the time, I think it's usually because we don't know. And so they're just offering a reason for it that just sounds better. Well, this has a little bit more argumentation to it than some of the runs you see. So whenever you see euphony given as a reason, take it with a grain of salt. And remember, about 50% of the excuses where euphony is given are probably false because we really don't know. Instead of saying we don't know, we try to say it's euphony. Well, in this case, it probably is the good sound and the avoidance of having the 2 V sounds together. All right? These are the apparent. And I say apparent exceptions because they really aren't exceptions in the sense that they follow then an additional rule that affects them. The major accent in the first case, the preposition in the second case, and euphony in the third case. Yes?
In the second example, you have P, the word P there, you're saying that ends in a vowel. So that yod, is that a heuric yod?
It's a heuric yod.
So that's why it ends in a vowel?
Right. If the yod was a consonant, it would have to have its own vowel under it.
Okay, so that's how we identify a heuric yod?
That's how you identify heuric yod, is there's no vowel under the yod, and therefore it is part of the preceding vowel. The same with a comet's hay. A comet's hay has to have a comets before it and no vowel under the hay. Okay? All right? And the same with the shurik, because the shurik can be a wow with a doubling dogish in its bosom if it has an additional vowel under it. So you have to watch those things. So when those sometimes silent consonants, if they do not have their own vowel under them, then they are silent and they go with the preceding vowel. They go with the preceding vowel. Okay? Good question. All right? Let's talk about the dagesh forte, the strong dagesh. It can occur in all the Hebrew letters except the gutturals, the major gutturals, the four. It can sometimes occur in the fifth guttural, that is sometimes a guttural, the resh. It doubles the letter. It doesn't double the writing of the letter, it doubles the pronunciation of the letter. It is the symbol for it. It occurs in two situations where it is compensation for a letter that disappears. We take the preposition min, that means from, we attach it to the noun melech, that means king, to say from a king, and if we say min melech, that sounds fine, but in the Hebrew, that N and M sound back to back is something, again, they do not like to have. And so whenever possible, the noon then elides or assimilates into the following letter, and to show that the letter has disappeared, to be a signal to us, a dagesh is put in that letter to assimilate it. So we have mim melech, mim melech. All right, you double the M, the meme in sound. There are actually three meme sounds in a row. The meme with the heuric under it that begins, and then the meme that concludes that syllable. And then you have the meme that begins the next syllable. Mim melech. All right? But the noon has disappeared. How do we know that the noon was there? The doubling dagesh in the meme that follows where the noon would have been. It always follows where the letter would have been. Okay? Min melech. That's one situation. And there's a number of things like that that we'll talk about as we go along. The second one is it's characteristic of some verb forms, like dib, bear. Notice we pronounce the bait twice. How do we know that? Because isn't the baith one of the bagad kafath letters? So how do we know it isn't just di, bear? Because the hirik is not a hirik yod. A hirik yod is a long vowel that can close a syllable. But the hirik normally by itself is considered a short vowel and therefore can't form a open syllable. It has to be closed. So it's dib, bear. Okay? So the first letter, the daleth, has a hardening dagesh in it. D, di. All right? The second letter has a doubling dagesh. Now, when you have a doubling dagesh and a bagad kafath letter, the pronunciation you give to the bagad kafath letter is the hard sound. So it's as though it were both dageshes. It's not div, ver, it's dib, bear. And if you want to remember how to pronounce the bagad kafath letters with and without, go back to your chart of the alphabet on pages 10 and 11 in your first chapter of the textbook, and you go through that chart, and with each of the Bagad Kafaf letters as you come to them, it'll give you both forms, the Beit with the Dagish, the Beit without. And then to the side, it will tell you how to transliterate it, and it'll tell you the sound. It'll tell you that the Beit with the Dagish is like the B in bat. It'll tell you that the Beit without the Dagish is like the V in vat. Okay? John?
Is that 2 syllables in that word?
That's 2 syllables, because you have 2 complete regular vowels, normal vowels.
The Dagish is there because technically there would be another Beit.
The Dagish is there to tell you you need to pronounce as though there were 2.
I'm just wondering because if there were 2 syllables, there would be the Yarif would be at the end, a vowel at the end of that first syllable.
Right. Here's what it represents. It represents this, and it represents this. Okay? It's as though it were written that way, the way you pronounce it. You pronounce it dib, silent schwa, closing the syllable, bear. But this one is not written.
That's why I was saying, so that Yarif doesn't affect the Dagish.
The hirik does not affect the Dagish. Okay? And this is pronounced dib, bear. Okay? And it's an intensive verb form. Other forms, you'll see it in one like this. Bik kesh. Here it's a kof, not a Bagad Kafaf letter, so you know it has to be a doubling Dagish. Or kid dash. All right? There you have another Bagad Kafaf letter. Who can tell me, besides the doubling Dagish in the middle of these 3 words, what is the other characteristic that shows up that is identical in all 3? The hirik. Right. Keep that in mind, because that's a clue. When you see words that have a hirik under the first root letter, and you see a Dagish in the middle root letter, those are 2 of the characteristics that we're going to talk about later of these kinds of verbs. And the name of that verb is piel. Piel. Sounds like it, doesn't it? Diber. Piel. Bikesh. Piel. Kidash. Little change in one vowel, but it still has that beginning that way. And it's the only name of a verb conjugation that has that name. And if you know the name, you know the game. If you know the name, you know the form. If you see the form, you know the name. All you have to do is pronounce it. That's why, again, you have to learn to pronounce Hebrew. We, Dr. Busnitz and I, do not believe in giving you tons of paradigms to memorize. Like when we were in seminary, we memorized something like 18 pages, 18 different kinds of verbs paradigms with all 7 conjugations. So that means 18 times 7 charts of verbs that we had to learn and memorize. We absolutely refuse to do that to you. It's not necessary, because if you can learn how to pronounce Hebrew, half of it is already resolved for you. Just learn how the language works. Learn how to hear the language. Learn how to pronounce the language, and you will solve your problems. So really emphasize learning how to pronounce these vowels, how to pronounce these consonants, because that is a large part of it there. You can save yourself having to memorize pages and pages of paradigms if you just learn how to properly pronounce the language. That's why I emphasize it so much. That's why we spend so much time on it here. You may talk to some other classes. They may already be talking about nouns and how nouns are formed and putting articles on nouns. We're still talking about pronunciation, consonants and vowels, and how words are formed. Why? Because later we'll be way ahead of them. Because while they're memorizing tons of paradigms, you will know how the language works without that memorization. Because once you understand how the language works, what it sounds like, you have a leg up on knowing this language. So the reason we spend time on it is for you to learn it. Please make certain you spend at least an hour for every hour of class. That's 4 hours you're in class. That's 4 hours a week outside of class studying. trying to get these sounds down. 4 hours in class, 4 hours of study the first week, the second week. That means you should have had 16 hours already of studying these. In 16 hours, you need to learn 22 letters, and you need to learn these vowels. Less than 40 items. So put your time into it and learn it, because it'll pay later. It'll pay huge dividends later. Okay? The Raphe. Yes, Jeremiah?
Just now, it appeared exaggerating the break.
Yes, I was exaggerating.
How fast would you really pronounce as you're reading it?
Okay. These would be Diber, Bikesh, Kedash. Be that fast. You can't hear it. You can't hear it. But I'm exaggerating it because you have to learn to pronounce that. That way you have to understand what's happening. Okay? The last thing we have time to cover this morning is the Raphe. For smoother pronunciation, sometimes Dagesh 40 is omitted and marked by Raphe. That's the line over the top of the word. So when you would have a doubling Dagesh in Bik-Kashu, take the doubling Dagesh out, and the reason the Raphe is put there is to remind you that that schwa is a vocal schwa. So it's Bik-Kashu. It actually quits doubling when you do that with the Raphe. It makes it Bik-Kashu. Bik-Kashu. And it's actually originally Bik-Kashu. But the kof is a very strong consonant to begin with. And so that will happen with that primarily. Now there's one other exception. And that's when we have Wayahi. Wayahi should have a doubling Dagesh in the first yod. But you'll never see it written that way. Why? And you don't see a Raphe over it. Why? It's one of those words that the Hebrews expect us to know and recognize and to properly pronounce, in spite of the fact that they've not given us the clue. It's Wayahi. Wayahi. Okay? We'll talk more about that. You'll see that many times in the days ahead.